The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Buckingham Palace as Prince William hurried down the marble corridor. His footsteps echoed in the silence, each sound reminding him of the weight pressing on his shoulders. The palace felt different now, quieter somehow, as if the very walls knew that King Charles was fighting his final battle. William's phone had buzzed at dawn with a message from his father's private secretary. "His Majesty wishes to see you immediately. It's urgent." Those simple words had sent ice through William's veins. For months he had watched his father grow weaker, seen the way Charles struggled to hide his pain during public appearances. The cancer had been relentless, stealing away the man who had waited his entire life to wear the crown. As William approached the king's private chambers, he could hear the soft murmur of voices inside. The royal physicians were speaking in hushed tones, their faces grave when they emerged. Dr. Harrison, the king's longtime doctor, placed a gentle hand on William's shoulder. "Your father is lucid today, Your Royal Highness. He's been asking for you since early morning. He says he has something important to discuss." The doctor's eyes held a sadness that made William's stomach clench. "I should prepare you, his time is becoming quite limited. Perhaps days, maybe a week at most." William nodded, trying to keep his composure even as his world tilted. He had known this day would come, had tried to prepare himself mentally for years. But nothing could truly ready someone for losing their father, especially when that father was also the King of England. Taking a deep breath, William knocked softly on the ornate door. His father's voice, weaker than it used to be but still commanding, called out for him to enter. The room was dimly lit, heavy drapes blocking most of the morning light. King Charles sat propped up in his bed, wearing his favorite navy silk pajamas. Despite his illness, his eyes still held that familiar spark of intelligence and warmth. "William, my boy," Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper, "come sit with me. There's something we need to discuss, something I should have told you years ago." William pulled a chair close to his father's bedside, noting how thin Charles had become. The strong hands that had once guided him through childhood were now frail and spotted with age and illness. Yet when Charles reached out to take his son's hand, William felt the same comfort he had as a child. "Father, you don't need to strain yourself," William began. But Charles shook his head firmly. "No, this cannot wait any longer. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about our family, about the crown, and about your future role as king." Charles paused, studying his son's face carefully. "There are secrets, William. Secrets that have been kept for generations. And now, as I prepare to leave this world, it's time for you to know the truth." William felt his heart racing. His father had always been a man of tradition, someone who believed in the established order of things. What could possibly be so important that it required this dramatic revelation? "Years ago, before you were born, I made a promise," Charles continued, his grip tightening slightly on William's hand. "A promise that I thought I would never have to honor. But circumstances have changed, and I fear that what's coming will test our family in ways we've never imagined." The room seemed to grow even quieter, as if the very air was holding its breath. William found himself leaning forward, hanging on every word his father spoke. Outside, he could hear the distant sounds of London traffic, the normal world continuing while his own universe was about to shift dramatically. "What kind of promise, Father?" William asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. When he opened them again, there was a look of profound sadness mixed with determination. "A promise about the crown itself, about who truly has the right to wear it, and about a choice that you, my son, will have to make very soon." William felt the blood drain from his face. The crown? The succession? Everything he had been taught about his destiny, about his future role as King William V, suddenly felt uncertain. His father's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything he believed about his birthright and his duty to the British people. "I don't understand," William whispered, though deep down he sensed that whatever his father was about to reveal would change the course of British history forever. The weight of generations of royal tradition seemed to press down on him as he waited for his father to continue, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. King Charles struggled to sit up straighter in his bed, his breathing labored but his resolve unwavering. William helped adjust the pillows behind his father's back, his mind racing with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. The afternoon light had shifted, casting long shadows across the room that seemed to mirror the darkness of the secret about to be revealed. In 1978, "Before I married your mother, I was deeply in love with someone else," Charles began, his voice growing stronger as if the telling itself was giving him energy. "Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she was unlike anyone I had ever met. She was brilliant, kind, and completely uninterested in royal protocol. We met at Cambridge, and for 2 glorious years I believed I could choose love over duty." William felt his world shifting beneath him. He had always known about his father's past relationships, but this woman's name had never been mentioned in any of the carefully curated royal histories he had studied. "We were secretly married in a small ceremony in Scotland," Charles continued, watching as shock registered on his son's face. "Only a handful of people knew. My closest friend James, a priest, and 2 witnesses. We thought we could find a way to make it work, to convince the palace that love should triumph over political arrangements." The words hit William like a physical blow. Secretly married? This changed everything about the succession, about legitimacy, about his own right to the throne. His hands began to tremble as the implications crashed over him. "But Sarah became pregnant almost immediately," Charles said, his voice now barely a whisper. "And when the palace learned about our secret marriage, they were furious. The Queen Mother threatened to have me removed from the line of succession entirely. The government claimed it would cause a constitutional crisis that could destroy the monarchy." William found his voice, though it sounded strange and distant to his own ears. "What happened to her? To the baby?" Tears began to flow down Charles's weathered cheeks. "They forced us to make an impossible choice. Sarah could disappear, take a new identity, and raise our child away from royal life with the promise that they would be provided for but never acknowledged. Or we could fight, and potentially bring down the entire institution that has stood for over 1,000 years. The room felt like it was spinning around William. He had a half-sibling somewhere in the world, someone with an equal or possibly stronger claim to the throne than he had. The careful order of succession that had been drilled into him since childhood suddenly seemed like an elaborate lie. "We chose to protect the monarchy," Charles continued, his voice breaking with emotion. "Sarah agreed to the arrangement because she loved me enough to sacrifice her own happiness for the greater good. She moved to Canada, changed her name to Sarah Collins, and raised our son, your brother, as a single mother." William stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at the gardens below. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of this secret felt crushing, like a mountain had been placed on his shoulders. "His name is Alexander," Charles said softly. "He's 2 years older than you, William. Technically, he's the rightful heir to the throne." The silence that followed was deafening. William could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, could feel the ground beneath his feet becoming unstable. All his life, he had been prepared to be king, had shaped every decision around that future responsibility. Now his father was telling him that his entire understanding of his place in the world was built on a lie. "Does he know?" William asked, still staring out the window, afraid to turn around and face his father. "No," Charles replied. "Sarah kept her promise. As far as Alexander knows, his father died in an accident before he was born. He's lived a normal life, became a teacher, married a wonderful woman named Emma, has 2 children of his own. He has no idea that he's the son of a king." William finally turned back to face his father, seeing the anguish written across the older man's face. "Why are you telling me this now? After all these years?" Charles reached toward the nightstand beside his bed, pulling out an old leather journal and a small velvet box. "Because I'm dying and I can't take this secret to my grave. And because Sarah passed away last month, cancer just like me. Before she died, she released me from our agreement. She said it was time for the truth to come out, whatever the consequences. The revelation that this unknown woman, his father's true love, his own stepmother in a way, had recently died added another layer of grief to the overwhelming emotions flooding through William. This wasn't just about succession or royal protocol anymore. This was about family, about loss, about love that had been sacrificed for duty. "Alexander doesn't know about his mother's death yet," Charles continued. "She made me promise to be the one to tell him everything, about her real identity, about his royal blood, and about the choice he'll have to make." William felt his legs give way, and he sank back into the chair beside his father's bed. "What choice?" Charles opened the velvet box, revealing an ornate signet ring that William had never seen before. The choice of whether to claim his birthright or to let you continue on the path we've all assumed you would take. The choice that will determine the future of the British monarchy and possibly the Commonwealth itself. The signet ring gleamed in the dim light, its ancient symbols seeming to mock everything William thought he knew about his destiny. Charles held it carefully, as if it contained the weight of centuries within its golden surface. The ring bore the royal coat of arms, but with subtle differences that William had never seen before, markings that suggested it predated even the current royal regalia. This ring belonged to Sarah, Charles explained, his voice growing weaker with each word. It was my wedding gift to her, crafted by the same jewelers who made the crown jewels. I had it made in secret, thinking that one day she would wear it openly as my queen. Instead, it became a symbol of everything we lost. William stared at the ring, unable to touch it. It represented a parallel life, a different version of history where love had triumphed over duty, where he might never have been born, where the entire Windsor line would have taken a different path. The thought made him dizzy with its implications. Father, you're asking me to potentially give up my birthright to someone who doesn't even know he's royal, William said, his voice strained with emotion. Someone who has lived his entire life as a commoner. How can that possibly be what's best for Britain? Charles closed the ring box and set it aside, then pulled out the leather journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with his father's careful handwriting. I've been writing to Alexander for 35 years, Charles said, opening to a random page. Letters I could never send, thoughts I could never share. Every birthday, every Christmas, every major moment in his life. I've documented it all, even though I couldn't be there. William watched as his father's trembling fingers traced the words on the page. The pain in Charles's eyes was unbearable to witness. This wasn't just about royal succession. This was about a father's love for a son he had been forced to abandon. I know this is overwhelming, Charles continued, closing the journal, but you need to understand that Alexander is remarkable. Despite having no royal training, no preparation for leadership, he's become exactly the kind of man who could serve Britain well. He spent his life teaching disadvantaged children, working in community centers, making a real difference in ordinary people's lives. The irony wasn't lost on William. While he had been groomed in palaces and educated at the finest institutions, his unknown brother had been living among the people he would potentially one day rule. Alexander understood poverty, struggle, and real-world problems in a way that William, despite his charitable work, could never fully comprehend. What exactly are you asking me to do? William asked, though he dreaded the answer. Charles took a shaky breath. I want you to go to Canada. Meet your brother. Tell him the truth about his parentage, about his mother's real identity, and about his claim to the throne. Then together, you both need to decide what's best for the monarchy and for Britain. The request was impossible, surreal. William tried to imagine walking up to a complete stranger and announcing that his entire life had been a lie, that he was actually the rightful king of England. The conversation seemed like something out of a fantasy novel, not real life. And if he wants to claim the throne? William asked quietly. Then you step aside gracefully and support him as he learns what it means to be king. Charles replied without hesitation. The monarchy is bigger than any one person, William. It's about service to the people, not personal ambition. William felt anger rising in his chest for the first time since entering the room. Easy for you to say, Father. You've had your time as king. You're asking me to give up everything I've trained for my entire life. Everything I've sacrificed for. Kate, the children, they've built their lives around the assumption that we'll be the next royal family. Charles reached out and grasped William's hand with surprising strength. And what if the rightful king can serve Britain better than you can? What if Alexander's connection to ordinary people, his understanding of real struggles, makes him the leader this country needs in these troubled times? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything William believed about himself and his fitness to rule. He had always assumed that his royal training made him the best choice to lead. But what if his father was right? What if someone who had lived a normal life could better understand the needs of modern Britain? There's something else, Charles said, reaching for another document from the nightstand. Sarah left this for Alexander. It's a letter explaining everything, along with legal documents that prove the validity of our marriage and his legitimate claim to the throne. But she also included instructions that he should only open it if someone from the royal family comes to him personally. William looked at the sealed envelope. his brother's name written in elegant handwriting across the front. Sarah Mitchell Collins had spent 35 years keeping this secret, and now she was reaching out from beyond the grave to potentially change the course of history. "I've arranged for a private jet to take you to Toronto tomorrow," Charles continued. "Alexander lives in a small town called Millbrook, about 2 hours outside the city. He teaches at the local high school and coaches the soccer team. His children are 8 and 10, your nephew and niece whom you've never met." The reality of having family members he knew nothing about hit William like a physical blow. Somewhere in Canada, there were children carrying royal blood who played in schoolyards and did homework at kitchen tables, completely unaware of their extraordinary heritage. The thought of meeting them, of potentially telling them their lives were about to change forever, filled him with both excitement and terror. The flight to Toronto felt endless, giving William far too much time to think about what lay ahead. He stared out the window at the clouds below, clutching his father's leather journal and Sarah's sealed letter. The weight of these documents felt enormous, as if they contained the power to reshape nations. His security detail was minimal, just 2 officers who believed they were accompanying him on a private humanitarian visit. William had barely slept the night before, lying awake next to Kate as she peacefully dreamed, unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. He had wanted to tell her everything, but his father had insisted that no one else could know until after Alexander made his decision. The secret felt like it was burning a hole through his chest. As the plane began its descent into Toronto, William's hands shook slightly. In just a few hours, he would be face to face with the brother he never knew existed, delivering news that would shatter everything Alexander believed about his identity. How do you tell someone that their ordinary life is actually extraordinary? That their mother kept a secret that could change the course of history? The drive to Millbrook took William through countryside that reminded him of rural England, rolling hills dotted with farms and small communities. It felt fitting somehow that Alexander had chosen a life so similar to the landscapes their father loved. The town itself was charming in an understated way. Tree-lined streets, a small downtown with local shops, and the kind of close-knit community feeling that William envied. William's driver, following GPS coordinates provided by Charles's research team, pulled up outside a modest 2-story house painted soft blue with white trim. A well-maintained garden filled the front yard, and a small soccer net stood in the driveway. This was where the rightful King of England lived, completely unaware of his destiny. For several minutes, William sat in the car gathering courage. Through the front window, he could see movement inside the house. A tall man with dark hair helping 2 children with what looked like homework at a kitchen table. The domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, that William almost asked his driver to turn around. How could he possibly disrupt this beautiful simplicity? Finally, William forced himself to get out of the car. He walked slowly up the stone pathway, noting how the house showed signs of careful maintenance despite its modest nature. Someone who loved this place lived here, someone who took pride in creating a warm home for his family. When William knocked on the front door, the sounds inside the house paused. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened to reveal a man who took William's breath away. Alexander was unmistakably Charles's son. The same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes, the same way of holding his shoulders. But where Charles had always carried the weight of royal duty, Alexander's face showed the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. "Can I help you?" Alexander asked, his Canadian accent warm and friendly. He was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, looking exactly like what he was, a small-town teacher enjoying a quiet evening with his family. "Alexander Collins?" William asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Yes, that's me. Are you lost? You look like you might be from out of town." Alexander's natural helpfulness shone through, the instinct to assist a stranger that spoke to his character. William took a deep breath. "My name is William. I have some information about your mother, Sarah, that I think you need to hear. It's quite important, and I'm afraid it's going to be rather shocking." Alexander's expression immediately grew serious. "My mother passed away several weeks ago. Are you from her lawyer's office? I thought we had finished with all the estate matters." "No," William said softly. "I'm not from any lawyer's office. May I come in? What I have to tell you requires privacy, and I promise you'll want to sit down for this conversation." Something in William's tone must have conveyed the gravity of the situation, because Alexander stepped aside and gestured him into the house. The interior was exactly what William had expected. Comfortable furniture, family photos everywhere. Children's artwork displayed proudly on the refrigerator. It was the kind of home William had always secretly envied, where love mattered more than protocol. "Emma, could you take the kids upstairs for a bit?" Alexander called to his wife, a pretty woman with kind eyes who appeared from the kitchen. "I need to speak with this gentleman privately." Emma looked curious but didn't ask questions, instead gathering the two children, a boy and girl who shared their father's dark hair and their mother's bright smile. As they headed upstairs, the little girl looked back at William with the innocent curiosity of childhood. "Your children are beautiful," William said, and meant it. "Thank you. They're my whole world," Alexander replied, settling into a comfortable armchair and gesturing for William to take the couch. "Now what's this about my mother? And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last name." William realized he had reached the point of no return. In the next few minutes, he would either change Alexander's life forever or walk away having kept his father's secret. Looking at this good man, this devoted father and teacher, William made his choice. "My last name is Windsor," William said quietly. "I'm Prince William, and I'm here because your mother asked my father to come find you after she died. She asked him to tell you the truth about who you really are." Alexander's face went completely white. He stared at William for several long seconds as if trying to process whether this was real or some elaborate prank. The confusion in his eyes was heartbreaking to witness. "I'm sorry, what?" Alexander finally managed to say. "Did you just tell me you're Prince William? Like the actual Prince William?" William nodded, reaching into his jacket to pull out Sarah's letter and his father's journal. "Your mother's real name was Sarah Mitchell, and the man she told you was your father, who died before you were born. That was a lie she told to protect you. Your real father is King Charles, and that makes you the rightful heir to the British throne." Alexander stared at William as if he had spoken in a foreign language. The color had drained completely from his face, and his hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. For a full minute, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a family clock on the mantelpiece. "This is insane," Alexander finally whispered. "You're telling me that my mother, who worked as a librarian and clipped coupons to save money, was secretly married to the King of England? That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible." William gently placed Sarah's letter on the coffee table between them. "I know how this sounds. I can barely believe it myself, and I've had 24 hours to process it. But your mother left this letter for you, explaining everything. She also left legal documents proving the marriage and your legitimacy." Alexander stared at the envelope as if it might explode. His name was written across it in handwriting he recognized. His mother's careful script that had signed birthday cards and school permission slips throughout his childhood. Seeing it now, knowing what it contained, made his hands shake. "My father is dying," William continued gently. "He has perhaps days left to live. He made me promise to find you and tell you the truth. He's been writing letters to you for 35 years, letters he could never send." "Letters to me?" Alexander's voice cracked. "But why? Why keep this secret for so long? Why let me grow up thinking I was nobody special?" William opened Charles's journal to a page dated exactly 35 years ago. "May I read you something he wrote on your first birthday? My dearest Alexander, today you turn 1 year old, and I wonder if you're walking yet, if you've said your first words. Sarah sent one photograph through intermediaries. You have my eyes but her beautiful smile. I pray that you're happy, that you feel loved, even though I cannot be there to hold you. I think about you every single day." Tears began streaming down Alexander's face. He had spent his entire life wondering about his father, creating elaborate fantasies about who he might have been. Learning that his father had thought about him daily, had loved him from afar, was almost too overwhelming to bear. "There are hundreds of entries like this," William said softly. "Birthdays, first day of school, graduation, your wedding day. He documented every milestone even though he couldn't share them with you." Alexander finally reached for Sarah's letter with trembling hands. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, weighted with decades of secrecy. As he opened it, several documents fell out: marriage certificates, DNA test results, and photographs he had never seen before. The photos showed his mother as a young woman, radiating happiness as she stood next to a young Charles in what was clearly a wedding setting. "Oh my God," Alexander breathed, picking up one of the photos. "This is really her. She looks so young, so happy. I've never seen her look like this." William watched as Alexander began reading his mother's letter, seeing the emotions play across. His face, shock, grief, anger, and something that might have been relief. The letter was several pages long, Sarah's final gift to her son after a lifetime of silence. "She says she wanted to tell me so many times," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "She says the hardest thing about dying wasn't leaving me, but taking this secret with her. She says she released your father from their agreement because she believed the world had changed enough that love could finally triumph over duty." The irony of those words wasn't lost on either man. Sarah had sacrificed love for duty 35 years ago, but on her deathbed, she had chosen to let love win at last. "Alexander," William said carefully, "there's something else you need to understand. According to British law, your father's first marriage makes you the legitimate heir to the throne. That means legally, you have a stronger claim than I do." Alexander looked up from the letter, his eyes wide with panic. "Are you saying I'm supposed to be king? That's ridiculous. I'm a high school teacher from small-town Canada. I don't know anything about being royal. I've never even been to England." "But you know about leadership," William pointed out. "You've spent your entire career helping young people, making a difference in your community. My father believes that might make you exactly the kind of king Britain needs right now." Alexander stood up abruptly and began pacing around the small living room. The weight of this revelation was clearly crushing him. Everything he thought he knew about himself, about his place in the world, had been shattered in the space of an hour. "What about your family?" Alexander asked suddenly. "Your wife? Your children? They're expecting to be the next royal family. How can you just sit here calmly telling me I should take that away from them?" William felt a pang of guilt. The truth was, he wasn't calm at all. The thought of telling Kate and the children that their future had changed so dramatically made him feel sick. But looking at Alexander, seeing the genuine goodness radiating from this man, William found himself wondering if his father might be right. "I won't lie to you," William said. "This would turn my family's life upside down. But the monarchy isn't about what's convenient for the Windsor family. It's about serving the British people. And if you can serve them better than I can, then that's what matters." Alexander stopped pacing and stared at William with something approaching awe. "You would really do that? You would give up being king? For someone you just met?" "For my brother," William corrected gently. "And yes, if that's what's best for Britain, then yes, I would." The two men looked at each other across the modest living room, both grappling with the magnitude of the decision that lay ahead. Somewhere upstairs, Alexander's children were probably getting ready for bed, unaware that their father was discovering he was royalty. Back in England, William's own children were asleep in their palace beds, equally unaware that their father might not become king after all. "I need time to think," Alexander said finally. "This is too much to process all at once. My whole life just changed in the space of an hour." William nodded understandingly. "Of course, but Alexander, there isn't much time. My father is dying, and decisions about the succession will need to be made very soon." The next 3 days passed in a blur of emotional conversations and impossible decisions. William had extended his stay in Millbrook, taking rooms at the small local inn while Alexander struggled to come to terms with his new reality. The two brothers, for that's what they had become in this short time, spent hours walking through the town's quiet streets, talking about everything from their childhoods to their fears about the future. Alexander had told Emma everything that first night, and she had responded with the kind of steady strength that showed why he had fallen in love with her. She asked practical questions about what royal life would mean for their children, about whether they could maintain their privacy and values in such a public role. Her concerns were valid and heartbreaking. She had married a small-town teacher, not a future king. "I keep thinking about my students," Alexander said as they sat on a bench overlooking the town's small lake. "These kids trust me. They come to me with their problems, their dreams. Some of them don't have much at home. And school is their safe place. If I leave, who's going to care about them the way I do?" William understood that concern more than Alexander realized. Throughout his royal duties, William had always been drawn to causes involving young people, education, and mental health. But his charitable work, no matter how sincere, was fundamentally different from Alexander's daily hands-on involvement in children's lives. "You could do more for children like yours as king than you ever could as a teacher," William pointed out. "Think about the policies you could influence, the programs you could create. You could change the lives of millions of young people, not just the few dozen in your classroom. But would I still be me?" Alexander asked quietly. "Would I still be the person Emma fell in love with, the father my kids need? Or would I become some distant figurehead surrounded by protocol and ceremony?" It was a question that William had wrestled with his entire life. How do you maintain your humanity when you're elevated to such an unnatural position? How do you stay connected to real people when you're surrounded by palaces and staff and people who can never quite treat you as an equal? "I won't lie to you," William said. "Royal life changes you, it has to. But the core of who you are, your values and your heart, those don't have to change. If anything, they become more important because they're what guide you in making decisions that affect millions of people." That evening, Alexander's children, Michael and Sophie, finally met their famous uncle. William had been nervous about the encounter, unsure how to relate to children who knew nothing about royal protocol or the weight of titles. But they treated him like any other adult friend of their father's, chattering about school and soccer and asking him if he wanted to see their latest Lego creation. Watching Alexander with his children, William saw something that made his decision crystallize. Alexander was a natural father, patient and engaged in a way that came from spending real time with his kids rather than scheduled appearances. He helped with homework without making it feel like a chore, listened to their excited stories about playground adventures with genuine interest, and tucked them in with the kind of bedtime ritual that spoke to years of loving consistency. "They're incredible kids," William told Alexander after Michael and Sophie had gone to bed. "They're my everything," Alexander replied simply. "The thought of exposing them to the kind of scrutiny royal children face terrifies me. I've seen what the press did to you and Harry when you were young. I can't imagine putting my children through that." It was a valid concern, and one that William couldn't easily dismiss. Royal children paid a price for their position, losing privacy and normal childhood experiences. But they also had opportunities to make a difference in the world, to use their platform for good in ways that ordinary people couldn't. The call came on Thursday morning. Charles's condition had worsened dramatically overnight, and the doctors believed he had hours, not days, remaining. William and Alexander needed to return to London immediately if Alexander wanted to meet his father before it was too late. The decision was made in that moment. Alexander kissed Emma and the children goodbye, promising to return with answers to all their questions. As they boarded the private jet back to England, both brothers were quiet, lost in their own thoughts about what the next few hours might bring. During the flight, Alexander read more of Charles's journal entries, learning about the father he had never known. William watched his brother's face as he discovered 35 years of paternal love that had been expressed only in private writings. There were entries about pride in Alexander's academic achievements, worry during his teenage years, joy at his wedding, and overwhelming happiness at becoming a grandfather to children he might never meet. "He really loved me," Alexander said quietly, tears streaming down his face as he read about his graduation from university. "All these years I thought my father just didn't care enough to stick around. But he loved me so much that he gave me up to protect me." "He loves both of us," William replied. "And whatever decision you make about the throne, that won't change." As they approached London, Alexander made his choice. "I want to meet him," he said firmly. "I want to look my father in the eye and tell him I forgive him for the sacrifice he made. But William, I'm not ready to be king. I don't think I ever will be. My life is in Canada with Emma and the children. That's where I belong." William felt a complex mix of relief and sadness wash over him. Relief that his own path to the throne remained clear, but sadness for his father, who would learn that his secret son was choosing a different life. "Are you certain?" William asked. "Once we tell him, there's no going back." "I'm certain," Alexander replied, looking out the window as London came into view below them. "But I want to know him, even if it's just for a few hours. I want him to know that his sacrifice wasn't in vain, that I grew up happy and loved. And I want to know my brother better too." The words hit William harder than he expected. In just a few days he had gained a brother he never knew he wanted, only to face the possibility of losing him again. But he also understood Alexander's choice. The man had built a beautiful life based on love and service to his community. Asking him to abandon that for royal duty would have been selfish. "We'll find a way to stay in touch," William promised. "Maybe not publicly, but privately. Our children should know each other. They're cousins, after all." Alexander smiled for the first time since learning the truth about his parentage. "I'd like that very much. And maybe when your father is gone and you're king, you could visit us in Millbrook sometimes, just as Uncle William, not as the King of England." The plane touched down at a private airfield outside London, where a royal convoy waited to rush them to Buckingham Palace. As they sped through the familiar streets, William pointed out landmarks to Alexander, sharing stories about growing up in the shadow of these historic buildings. For Alexander, seeing London for the first time as a member of the royal family, even temporarily, was overwhelming. When they arrived at the palace, the gravity of the situation hit them both. This wasn't a tourist visit or a casual meeting. They were racing against time to give a dying king the chance to meet the son he had loved from afar for 35 years. The halls that William had run through as a child felt different now, charged with the weight of secrets finally being revealed and a family being reunited in its final hours. The palace corridors seemed endless as William led Alexander toward their father's chambers. Alexander walked in stunned silence, taking in the grandeur that surrounded him, the priceless paintings, the ornate furniture, the sense of history embedded in every stone. This was the world he could have grown up in, the life that might have been his if different choices had been made 35 years ago. Outside Charles's door, they paused. William could see the terror in Alexander's eyes, the overwhelming magnitude of meeting the father he had dreamed about his entire life. Through the heavy oak door, they could hear the soft murmur of medical equipment and hushed voices of the royal physicians. "Are you ready?" William asked softly. Alexander nodded, though his hands were shaking. "I've been ready for this my whole life. I just never knew it." William knocked gently, and Dr. Harrison appeared, his face grave but relieved to see them. "Your Majesty has been asking for you both constantly," he whispered. "He's very weak, but he's lucid. Please don't tire him too much." The room was dimmer than when William had left it just days before. Charles lay propped against his pillows, his breathing shallow but his eyes alert. When he saw William enter with a stranger, his entire face transformed with an emotion so powerful it was painful to witness. "Alexander?" Charles whispered, his voice barely audible. "Hello, Father," Alexander said, the word feeling strange on his tongue but somehow completely natural at the same time. Charles began to weep, tears flowing freely down his gaunt cheeks. "My son, my beautiful son. You look so much like your mother when she was young. Come closer, please. Let me see you properly." Alexander approached the bed slowly, overwhelmed by the emotion radiating from this frail man who was both a stranger and the most important person he had never known. When he reached the bedside, Charles lifted a trembling hand to touch his face, as if confirming that this moment was real. "I'm so sorry," Charles whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for you. I thought about you every single day, wondered what kind of man you were becoming, prayed that you were happy." "I was happy," Alexander assured him, covering his father's hand with his own. "Mom made sure of that. She told me wonderful stories about my father, about how much he loved me. She just never told me he was still alive." "She was protecting you," Charles said. "We both were. But I want you to know that giving you up was the hardest thing I ever did. Harder than any royal duty, any sacrifice the crown demanded. You were my heart walking around outside my body." William watched this reunion with tears in his own eyes, seeing his father's anguish finally being healed after decades of separation. The love between Charles and Alexander was immediate and powerful, transcending the years they had lost. "I brought your mother's ring," Charles said, gesturing weakly toward the nightstand, "and all my letters to you. I want you to have them, to know that you were loved every moment of your life, even when I couldn't show it." Alexander picked up the signet ring, holding it carefully. "She wore this sometimes," he said quietly. "She told me it belonged to my grandmother, but now I understand. She was keeping a piece of you close to her heart." "Keep it," Charles said. "It belongs to you by right, along with everything else that should have been yours." This was the moment William had been dreading. He watched his father's face as Alexander took a deep breath and prepared to make his decision known. "Father," Alexander said gently, "I want you to know that I forgive you for everything. I understand why you made the choices you did, and I don't blame you for them. But I can't take the crown. My life is in Canada, with my wife and children. That's where I belong, where I can do the most good." Charles closed his eyes for a long moment, and William wondered if his father would be disappointed or angry. When Charles opened his eyes again, there was only love and understanding. "I hoped you might say that," Charles admitted with a weak smile. "Not because I don't think you'd make a wonderful king, you would, but because you've built something beautiful with your life, something real and meaningful. The world needs teachers like you as much as it needs kings. But I want to know you," Alexander continued. "And I want my children to know their grandfather, even if only briefly. And their uncle," he added, looking at William with genuine affection. "Nothing would make me happier," Charles said, his voice growing weaker. "William, bring me the official documents from the safe. It's time to make this formal." William retrieved a folder of legal papers that Charles had prepared. With shaking hands, the dying king signed a formal renunciation of Alexander's claim to the throne, witnessed by both sons and Dr. Harrison. The papers would ensure that there could never be any question about the succession, protecting both Alexander's privacy and William's future reign. "Now you're free to be exactly who you are," Charles told Alexander. "A teacher, a father, a good man making a difference in the world. That's more valuable than any crown." The three men, father and two sons, spent the next several hours talking quietly. Charles shared stories about Alexander's mother, about their brief but intense love affair, about the joy and heartbreak of those 2 years. Alexander told his father about his life, his students, his children, the work that gave his life meaning. As the sun began to set, Charles grew noticeably weaker. "I need to rest now," he said softly. "But before I sleep, I want to tell you both how proud I am. William, you'll be a magnificent king because you understand duty and sacrifice. Alexander, you're already magnificent because you understand love and service. You're both exactly the men I hoped you'd become." Alexander leaned down and kissed his father's forehead. "Thank you for letting me meet you. Thank you for loving me from afar all these years." "Thank you for forgiving an old man's mistakes," Charles replied. William took his father's hand. "I'll take care of everything now, Father. You can rest." "I know you will," Charles said, his eyes drifting closed. "I'm so proud of both my sons. So very proud." King Charles III died peacefully that night, surrounded by love and finally at peace with the choices he had made. The official announcement spoke only of his immediate family being present. But in that quiet room, a father had been reunited with the son he thought he'd lost forever, and two brothers had found each other across an ocean of secrets. Alexander returned to Canada the next morning, carrying with him his father's letters, his mother's ring, and the knowledge that he had been deeply loved his entire life. He would live quietly with Emma and the children, teaching his students and serving his community, secure in the knowledge that he had made the right choice for everyone involved. William became King William Feck, but he carried with him a new understanding of what leadership truly meant. His brother had shown him that real service came not from wearing a crown, but from touching individual lives with compassion and dedication. As he prepared for his coronation, William knew that he would rule not just as a Windsor, but as someone who had learned the value of choosing love over duty, even when duty demanded everything. The secret of Alexander's existence remained between the two brothers, a private bond that would connect their families across continents for generations to come. Sometimes the most important relationships are the ones the world never knows about, and sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing to remain hidden so that others can step into the light.